I'm going to read a really short piece, the shortest piece from New Monsters. It's called This the Body. This had been the body, the one he lived in, the one that he now longed for, the perfect vessel in which he might have passed a consummate life had he not been felled early, barely 40, and with so much left unrealized. He stood beside it in the morgue, this body, surrounded by mother, brother, ex-wife, young daughter. He was an observer of their abject grief. He knew he should have felt it too, as much for them as for himself, but he was detached from them as well as his physical self. Knowing that there was, in fact, a beyond, whatever that was, had relieved the great fear of unknowing. He supposed that a considerable part of their grief was dealing with their unknown, their own unknowing. For his part, he felt only a lugubrious inanition, seeing himself as a corpse. It was larger than emotion, more harrowing than a greatest fear, more horrifying than live burial. He had tried to rejoin with his former flesh. Of course he had. Oil and water, even when combined, will separate. His attempt yielded a similar result, a surface penetration without adherence, with only temporary emulsification. For many hours he remained beside his former self, observing the stages of decomposition with indignant awe. Then they pumped fluid into him and applied makeup and dressed him in a suit purchased to rot. He looked to himself like a powdered statue, decidedly unlifelike. But those who came to view him stuffed into his metal casket said he looked good and praised the good work that the funeral home had performed, considering the circumstances. Once in the grave, though, the facade collapsed like paper props in the rain. In its permeable capsule, the body blackened and festered, seeped and oozed and seethed until he no longer resembled what he had been, and, vigil concluded, he rose from the blackened mool and entered the period of wonder. There were others on this road, on all roads, to be sure. They crowded places which in life had appeared blank, empty, fields and ice floes and the like. They stood on seas and hovered like undulating heat waves above the sun-baked sands. He saw them in houses and cars, in basements, abandoned department stores, upon the pylons of bridges. They watched each other, and more importantly, they watched the living and waited. Sometimes he recognized them in the bodies of the living, saw in the flesh eyes shadows newly seated. Though they did not see him, they nonetheless seemed to sense him. And when he came near, they fled from him in their new forms to where there was light and others of flesh. How had they done it? He pondered this through the years, formless spans of night/day, where the world changed but no longer changed him. He carried his experiences with him like a forgotten language, and after an age, he found that his thoughts were beginning to thin and decay like bit rot. So he searched until he came upon a usurpation by one of his own kind, and witnessing how it was done, began to search for his new form. The infant lay still in liminal dream, quiescent and open to intrusion. He found its nascent soul floating on drafts of neural ether, and he suggested more dreams. An orange balloon set against a blue sky baked clean of vapor. The child, captivated by the complementary colors and the balloon's height, the temptation of seeing the grand map of it all, the life that lay before it, took the offered string and commenced the ride, releasing it as it rose, its tenuous hold on its young flesh, and laughing until, at length, the inchoate soul vanished. Then he, with the last of his dissolving will, lay his fragmented consciousness upon the vacated flesh, and after a fizzing, flashing scintillation which smelled something like gunpowder, settled into the untenanted shell, which had missed not a breath and only a beat of its rapid heart. The eyes opened, the flesh held, but within it, so he had vanished, like that child into the ozone. And so the crime, acted out with impunity, had been, as was manifestly necessary, equitable.